Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Staff Sergeant Cole Morrison had survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, countless firefights, and 18 months of hell that would haunt most men for life. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what awaited him in his own home. The suburban house on Maple Street looked exactly as he'd left it. Same white picket fence, same carefully manicured lawn that his wife Ashley took such pride in. Cole's duffel bag hit the porch with a dull thud as he fumbled for his keys, anticipating the reunion with his 8-year-old daughter Emma that had sustained him through the darkest nights overseas. The house was quiet, too quiet. "Emma? Ashley?" Cole called out, his voice echoing through the empty foyer. Military instincts kicked in. Something was wrong. The living room showed signs of recent activity. Wine glasses on the coffee table, a man's leather jacket draped over his favorite armchair. That's when he heard it. Soft sobbing coming from upstairs. Cole took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. Emma's bedroom door was ajar, and what he saw inside stopped him cold. His daughter, his beautiful little girl with the golden curls that cascaded past her shoulders, was sitting on her bed, trembling. Her head was shaved to the scalp, revealing pale, vulnerable skin that had never seen sunlight. "Emma." Cole's voice cracked as he rushed to her side. She looked up with red-rimmed eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Daddy, what happened?" Cole pulled her into his arms, feeling her small body shake against his chest. Emma whispered, barely audible, "Mother and her ex-boyfriend John. They said I looked too much like you, that I needed to learn to be more like them." The words hit Cole like shrapnel. Ashley appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a silk dress he'd never seen before. Behind her stood a man Cole recognized from Ashley's Facebook posts. John Kruger, the real estate developer she'd claimed was just a friend. "Cole, you're home early," Ashley said, not a trace of shame in her voice. "We weren't expecting you until next week." John stepped forward, all swagger and expensive cologne. "Listen, Morrison, Ashley and I have been talking. She's filed for divorce. It's better this way, clean break, you know." Cole stood slowly, never taking his eyes off them. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside him. The man who had once loved Ashley with blind devotion died, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. "You cut my daughter's hair," Cole said quietly. "She needed discipline," John shrugged. "Kid was getting too wild." Ashley agreed. Cole's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to remain calm. Years of military training had taught him that emotion was the enemy of strategy. He looked at Ashley, searching for any sign of the woman he'd married, the mother he'd thought she was. "Get out," Cole said simply. "This is my house too," Ashley snapped. "I'm not going anywhere. I said get out." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. John stepped closer, puffing out his chest. "Or what? You'll hit a woman?" "Real classy, soldier boy." Cole smiled then, a predator's grin that made both Ashley and John take an unconscious step backward. "I don't hit women." "But you're not a woman, are you, John?" "Cole, don't," Ashley started. "Get your things. Both of you. Now." As they gathered their belongings, Cole knelt beside Emma again. "I'm going to fix this, sweetheart. I promise." "Will my hair grow back?" she whispered. "Yes, baby. And while it does, we're going to make sure the people who hurt you understand what that feels like." That night, after Emma had cried herself to sleep in his arms, Cole sat in his study, staring at the divorce papers Ashley had left on his desk. Irreconcilable differences. No mention of the months of lies, the affair, the psychological torture of his daughter. He opened his laptop and began typing. Cole Morrison was no ordinary veteran. He'd been special forces, trained in psychological warfare, infiltration, and precision strikes against high-value targets. Ashley and John had no idea what they'd awakened. The plan that formed in his mind was elegant in its brutality. He wouldn't destroy them quickly. That would be too merciful. Instead, he would systematically dismantle everything they held dear, using their own weaknesses and fears against them until they begged for forgiveness that would never come. Cole made 3 phone calls that night. The first was to his lawyer, Marcus Webb, a bulldog who specialized in military divorces. The second was to his old unit commander, who owed him several favors. The third was to a private investigator named Tony Ricci, whose methods fell into the gray areas between legal and questionable. By dawn, Cole had a comprehensive dossier on John Kruger. The man was exactly what he appeared to be, a narcissistic predator who preyed on vulnerable women. But he was also careless, leaving a trail of angry ex-wives, business partners he'd screwed over, and financial obligations he'd dodged through legal loopholes. Ashley's file was thinner, but more damning. She'd been planning this for months, possibly years. Hidden bank accounts, secret meetings with divorce attorneys, even attempts to turn Emma against him while he was deployed. Cole closed the laptop and checked on Emma one more time. She was sleeping fitfully, her bald head looking so small and vulnerable against the pillow. Rage burned in his chest like molten steel. They had hurt his daughter. They had betrayed everything sacred. And now they were going to learn what it meant to cross a man who had nothing left to lose. 3 weeks later, Ashley was beginning to understand that Cole Morrison was not the man she'd married. Gone was the trusting soldier who'd believed her lies about working late and girls' nights out. In his place was something calculating and relentless. It started small. Ashley's credit cards were mysteriously declined at the boutique where she'd planned to buy a dress for John's company party. Her phone service was interrupted due to billing irregularities. The lease on her BMW was suddenly under review by the financial company. "It's just paperwork," John assured her as they sat in his downtown penthouse. "Cole's trying to scare us, but he can't touch my money." Ashley wasn't so sure. She'd seen something in Cole's eyes that last day, a coldness that reminded her why other soldiers had called him the ghost during his tours. But John was confident, arrogant even, and his lifestyle was intoxicating. The penthouse, the expensive dinners, the promise of a life without financial worry. What Ashley didn't know was that Cole had spent the past 3 weeks infiltrating their world like the special operative he'd been trained to be. He'd rented an apartment across from John's building under a false name. He'd befriended John's doorman, his favorite bartender, even the secretary at his real estate firm. The first real blow came when John's biggest client, Henderson Development, suddenly pulled out of a $50 million deal. No explanation, just a terse email about concerns regarding project viability. "This is insane," John raged, pacing his office. "Henderson's been chasing this deal for 6 months. Something's not right." His assistant, Linda, looked uncomfortable. "There are rumors, Mr. Kruger. Someone's been asking questions about the Riverside project, about the environmental impact studies." John's face went pale. The Riverside project was his crown jewel, but he'd cut corners on the environmental assessments. Nothing illegal, technically, but enough to scare away investors if the right questions were asked. "Who's asking questions?" "I don't know, but there's a new environmental consultant in town, some veteran named Morrison." Meanwhile, Ashley was discovering that her carefully constructed new life was falling apart. The women she'd considered friends, other military wives she'd gossiped with about their boring husbands, were suddenly unavailable for lunch dates. Invitations to social events dried up. Even her yoga instructor seemed cool and distant. It was her neighbor, Patricia Hendricks, who finally explained what was happening. "Ashley, honey, I think you should know, people are talking. About you and that man, about what you did to Emma's hair." Colonel Mitchell's wife saw the photos. Ashley's blood ran cold. "What photos?" "The ones showing Emma's head shaved, crying. Someone sent them to every military spouse in the group chat, along with some very detailed messages about what really happened while Cole was deployed." Ashley rushed home and checked her phone. The messages were brutal, clinical in their detail. Someone had documented every lie she'd told, every secret meeting with John, even her attempts to manipulate Emma's feelings about her father. But what made her hands shake was the precision of it all. This wasn't random gossip. This was warfare. The message at the bottom was simple. Actions have consequences. A concerned friend. That evening, John's troubles escalated. He received a call from his business partner, Rick Santos, who sounded panicked. "John, we need to talk. Now." They met at their usual bar, but Rick looked like a man facing execution. "Someone's been digging into our projects. Deep. They know about the cost overruns on the Morrison complex, the permit issues on Cedar Heights, even that thing with the wetlands on the East Side deal. Who's asking? I don't know, but they're good. Professional. They've been talking to our subcontractors, our permit guys, even some of our former investors. And John, they know about the shell companies. John's empire was built on cutting corners and creative accounting. Nothing that would land him in prison, but enough to destroy his reputation and his business if it all came out at once. It's him, John muttered. It's that psycho ex-husband. Who? Cole Morrison. Ashley's husband. The guy's some kind of special forces nut job. Rick laughed nervously. Come on, John. What's one guy going to do? You're being paranoid. But John wasn't paranoid. He was right. Cole had spent the past month systematically identifying every weakness in John's business and personal life. The environmental questions, the business investigations, the social isolation, it was all part of a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to apply maximum pressure at multiple points. Ashley tried calling Cole that night, but he didn't answer. She drove to the house, but it was dark, and Emma was staying with Cole's sister in another state. When she tried to contact Emma directly, she discovered that Cole had changed the little girl's phone number. The next morning, Ashley woke to find her apartment building surrounded by news vans. Somehow, overnight, she'd become the center of a social media firestorm. Someone had leaked the story of Emma's hair, complete with photos and documentation of the psychological abuse. The hashtag Justice for Emma was trending locally. Ashley's phone buzzed with notifications. Her employer, the marketing firm where she worked as a coordinator, asking her to take indefinite leave while they assessed the situation. Her landlord, concerned about the negative attention affecting other tenants. Even her own mother, calling from Florida to ask if the horrible things she'd seen online were true. The beautiful, controlled life Ashley had built was crumbling, and she couldn't understand how Cole was orchestrating it all. She was dealing with a man who had been trained to topple governments, and she was fighting him with the tactics of suburban social warfare. John's situation was worse. By the end of the week, 3 more major clients had canceled their contracts. The environmental consultant, who turned out to be a legitimate expert Cole had hired, had raised enough questions about John's projects to trigger formal investigations by the County Planning Commission. But the coup de grace came when John discovered that someone had been methodically contacting every woman he'd ever dated or been married to. His ex-wife, Sarah, called him in tears. They know about the restraining order, John. About what you did to me and the kids. It's all coming out. John had always been careful to target women who were vulnerable, isolated, or ashamed to speak up. But Cole had found them all, given them a platform, and shown them they weren't alone. The stories were remarkably consistent. Psychological manipulation, financial control, and in Sarah's case, physical violence that John had convinced her was her fault. The local newspaper, the Tribune, ran a series called Behind Closed Doors that detailed John's pattern of predatory behavior. The investigation was thorough, well-documented, and devastating. John's business partners began distancing themselves. His building's board of directors asked him to consider selling his penthouse due to the security concerns from protesters. Ashley finally confronted Cole at Emma's school pickup, cornering him in the parking lot. "Stop this," she pleaded. "Whatever you're doing, just stop. We can work something out." Cole looked at her with those cold, dead eyes she'd come to fear. "You cut my daughter's hair because she looked like me. You tried to erase me from her life while I was risking mine for this country. I made a mistake." "No." Cole's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through her excuses like a blade. "You made a choice. You chose to hurt an innocent child to make a point. You chose to betray everything we built together. And now you're choosing to face the consequences. John says you can't keep this up forever, that you'll make a mistake." Cole smiled that predator's grin again. "Tell John I'm just getting started." As he drove away with Emma, whose hair was starting to grow back in soft golden fuzz, Ashley realized that she and John weren't fighting a man seeking revenge. They were fighting a professional who had made their destruction his mission, and they were losing. 2 months after Cole's return, John Kruger's world had collapsed so completely that he barely recognized his own life. The penthouse was gone, seized by creditors when his business partners dissolved their company and filed bankruptcy. The cars, the boats, the expensive toys that had defined his identity, all liquidated to pay debts that seemed to multiply daily. But Cole wasn't finished. Ashley sat in her studio apartment. All she could afford now that her reputation had been systematically destroyed, staring at a letter from family court. Cole was seeking full custody of Emma, and his case was ironclad. Documentation of emotional abuse, witness testimony from neighbors who'd heard Ashley screaming at the child, and medical records showing Emma's anxiety levels had plummeted since staying with her father. The knock on her door came at exactly 8 p.m. John stood in the hallway, looking like a broken man. His expensive suits had been replaced by wrinkled khakis and a stained polo shirt. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow with the kind of exhaustion that comes from constant fear. "We need to talk," he said. Ashley let him in, noting how he moved, constantly checking over his shoulder, jumping at every sound. "What's wrong with you?" "He's everywhere, Ashley. Morrison is everywhere." John collapsed on her cheap couch, his hands shaking. "You know how I met you? At that charity fundraiser last year? The one for wounded veterans." Ashley nodded, confused. "That wasn't random. He was there. Morrison was there, watching us. I thought he was just another wounded soldier, but he was gathering intelligence. He knew about us before we even knew about us." "That's impossible." Cole was deployed. He had leave. One weekend, right around the time you and I started talking. I've been going through my phone records, my credit card statements. Every time we met, every hotel, every restaurant, he knew. He's been planning this for over a year. Ashley felt the room spin. "You're paranoid. You're losing it." John grabbed her arms, his grip desperate. "Listen to me. Today, I went to my lawyer, the fourth one this month, because the others keep dropping me. And you know what he told me? The prosecutor's office is considering charges." "What charges?" "Tax evasion. Fraud. They've got documentation going back 5 years. Every corner I cut, every deal I fudged, every bribe I paid to get permits pushed through. They have it all. And you want to know how?" Ashley's mouth went dry. "How?" "Morrison gave it to them, wrapped up in a nice little package with a bow on top. He's been inside my business for months, copying files, recording conversations, probably hacking my computers. The FBI thinks I'm some kind of criminal mastermind, but I'm just a guy who bent a few rules to make money." John released her and buried his face in his hands. "He's not just destroying us, Ashley. He's making us destroy ourselves. Every move we make, every desperate decision, it's all part of his plan." As if summoned by their conversation, Ashley's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email." The email contained a video file. Ashley opened it with trembling fingers, and her blood turned to ice. It was security footage from John's building, showing them entering his penthouse together while Cole was overseas. But this wasn't just one night. It was dozens of nights compiled into a timeline that showed the progression of their affair with clinical precision. But the worst part wasn't the evidence of her infidelity. It was the audio that had been captured from John's apartment. Their conversations about Cole, about Emma, about how they could handle the situation when he returned. Ashley heard her own voice suggesting they tell Emma her father didn't love her anymore. John's voice talking about how they could break Cole's spirit, so he'd just give up and go away. "Oh God," Ashley whispered. He heard everything. John was crying now, great heaving sobs of a man who'd finally understood the depth of his mistake. "He's not human, Ashley. Normal people don't do this. Normal people don't plan revenge for a year before their wife even knows she wants a divorce." Ashley's phone rang. Cole's number. "Answer it," John begged. "Please. Maybe we can make a deal." Ashley's hands shook as she answered. "Cole." "Ashley." His voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I assume you've seen the video. Please, Cole. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... You cut my daughter's hair." The simple statement cut through all her desperate words. In the background, Ashley could hear Emma laughing, actually laughing for the first time in months. "I want to make you an offer," Cole continued. "A one-time deal. Anything," Ashley gasped. "John has 48 hours to leave the state. Permanently. If I ever see him again, the video goes to the FBI, the IRS, and every news station in the county. And me, you sign over all parental rights to Emma. Full custody, no visitation. In exchange, I'll let you keep your job at the marketing firm, assuming you can convince them you've learned from your mistakes. Ashley felt like she was drowning. I can't give up Emma. She's my daughter. No, Cole said quietly. A mother protects her child. A mother doesn't shave her daughter's head to punish her father. You're just a woman who gave birth to my daughter and then tried to use her as a weapon against me. And if I refuse, then you both go down with the ship. The video gets released, John goes to federal prison, and you lose Emma anyway after the child abuse investigation concludes. The line went dead. John was hyperventilating on the couch. What did he say? Ashley told him, and John nodded like a man accepting his execution. I have to take it. I have to run. What about us? What about our plans? John looked at her with something approaching pity. Ashley, there's no us. There never was. I was using you to get back at successful men like your husband, and you were using me to escape a life you thought was boring. Morrison just made us face the truth. That night, John Kruger packed a single suitcase and drove out of town. He would eventually settle in Oregon under a different name, working construction and living in a trailer park. The man who had once owned a penthouse would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for Cole Morrison to finish what he'd started. Ashley signed the custody papers 3 days later. She kept her job, but the women who had once envied her lifestyle now whispered behind her back. She would never remarry, never have more children, never again underestimate the cost of betraying someone who loved her completely. 6 months later, Emma Morrison celebrated her 9th birthday with a head full of beautiful golden curls and a smile that could light up a room. She never asked about her mother or why Mommy had hurt her. Cole had made sure she understood that some people make bad choices, but that didn't mean she was bad or unloved. Cole never remarried either, but not because he couldn't find love again. He'd learned something about himself during those months of systematic revenge. He was capable of a coldness that frightened even him. The man who could orchestrate the complete destruction of 2 lives wasn't someone who should be trusted with another person's heart. But he was exactly the kind of man who could raise a strong, confident daughter who would never let anyone hurt her the way her mother had. Emma grew up knowing that her father would move heaven and earth to protect her, and that knowledge made her fearless. Years later, when Emma was in college studying psychology, she would write a paper about the long-term effects of betrayal trauma on families. Her professor praised her clinical insight and emotional depth, never knowing that her expertise came from watching her father dismantle 2 lives with the precision of a military campaign. Cole kept the video of Ashley and John, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. In his desk drawer, next to Emma's school photos and the medals he'd earned overseas, the flash drive served as proof that some betrayals are so profound they change the fundamental nature of who you are. He never regretted what he'd done to Ashley and John. They had hurt his daughter, and in Cole Morrison's world, that was an unforgivable sin. The fact that they'd expected forgiveness, that they believed their betrayal was somehow within the bounds of normal human behavior, only proved they'd never understood the kind of man they were dealing with. Emma's hair had grown back. The scars on Ashley and John's lives never would. And in the end, Cole Morrison slept peacefully every night, knowing that justice had been served with the precision and thoroughness that only a soldier could provide.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.